The Hyundai Ioniq Electric that we've got over here can be seen by many as a competitor to the Nissan Leaf from its looks, practicality, and even from its price, where it starts from just shy of £31,000. Now, if you'd like a more detailed comparison of the two vehicles, or indeed some of its other competitors, do check out our written review. It will be down in the description below. Furthermore, down there you'll find a link to our Instagram. It's at TotallyEVnet. So if you do use that social media platform, would very much appreciate a follow. So let's kick things off and talk about the exterior design. And here I'm not too much of a fan of the Ioniq Electric's look, and that's namely due to its front design. Here the front grille, which is of course being covered up and replaced by a plastic insert, not only to help with the drag coefficient, but also houses the external speaker, which we'll talk about in just a bit. It does not really fit with the rest of the theme of the car. It feels that something's just kind of been stuck on. Same with its fish-like grills at the front bumper. This gives it kind of a sporty edge, but this is anything but a sporty vehicle. On the plus side, the headlights look good, and the same could be said about the tail lights and the boot design, while at the side you've got 16-inch alloys that come as standard and body colored trim. In other words, you've got no plastic wheel arches or side skirts, which are a definite plus point in my books. Now, as we move inside the vehicle, the car very much has a premium look and feel to it, from the steering wheel to the dashboard and the design of it, and even the center console. Now, at the middle of the dashboard you've got a 10.25-inch infotainment display. It supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. However, the firmware integration isn't as well done, where a third of the screen is kind of rendered useless. On the subject of technology, it's actually good to see that you've got the AAC and SBC codec supported over Bluetooth, and this also links with its audio system. Now, there's an 8-speaker system inside the Ioniq Electric, and that is very much in both trims, and they're actually very much fun to listen to. If you want to know how it actually performs, do check out on your pop-up banner, or indeed in the description below, for a written review and indeed video review of the audio system that's comprised within the vehicle. But I digress. Moving on from there, we've also got the instrument cluster. The instrument cluster is really well done, and there's no complaints here because it's very much comprehensive and gives you all the key information you need. Unfortunately, there's no head-up display in order to aid you when it comes to driving. Now, climate controls are touch-based. Although I'm not a massive fan of touch-based controls, I do feel that they're very responsive, and I had no issues when it came to interacting with the dashboard. Furthermore, the distance it has, at least with my arm's reach, it's absolutely perfect. Underneath the dashboard display and indeed the climate controls, you've got a USB slot and you've got 2 cigarette lighters. I would have potentially liked to see 2 or 3 USB slots instead, rather than 2 cigarette lighters. You've then got a compartment over here which is very much easy to access and allows you to store some valuables. The same could be said around all 4 doors. You've got a decent amount of space, where at the front doors you can also fit a 500ml bottle of water, for example. Now, at the center console you've also got 2 cup holders, and you've also got a very convenient QI wireless charging pad, which essentially allows you to place a smartphone and charge it wirelessly without having you to worry about it. Now, in terms of the gear controls, or should I say more in terms of the different drive modes that you can select, in other words neutral, reverse, drive and park, it's done via a set of 4 buttons. I would have preferred a rotary dial, but nevertheless I have no issues with it, and it's pretty much intuitive after you get used to the vehicle. There are a few other extra buttons found underneath this. So for example, if you go with the Premium SE, you've also got, let's say, heat warmers, or let's say the steering wheel warmer as well, which you can access. Below that you've got a little compartment storage space, which allows you to place, let's say, a large size purse, or indeed let's say sunglasses or whatever have you. And there's also a USB port here where you can trail it for rear occupants, or indeed use it in order to charge a smartphone or a tablet, a small size tablet should I say, in this storage compartment as well. Now, I did say I would talk about its external speaker, and that's what's comprised at the front of the vehicle. The system that the Hyundai group have used is called VESS, and this can be enabled or disabled through a button find by the driver's side door, and it's enabled by default each time you turn on the vehicle. Now, the reason behind this, other than EU regulation, is for it to alert external pedestrians, for example, of your oncoming presence, which is always a good sign. On the plus side, you can't hear it inside the vehicle. I would have actually wished it was a little bit louder for external pedestrians, because it sometimes can't be heard that loudly, and for those people who are not aware of electric cars, it might take them a little bit by surprise. Now, next up we've got seat comfort. Now, the 5 seats themselves themselves are a little bit stiff, namely at the back. The middle seat is particularly stiff. On the plus side, if you don't use that seat, you can reveal a small little armrest, which also has 2 cup holder spaces for rear occupants. Now, in terms of legroom and headroom, it's plentiful both at the front and the back for your legs, so I'm just under 6 foot and I have no issues, whilst headroom is a little bit more limited. So if you're going to be 6'2", I think you'll struggle to fit comfortably at the back. Now, the same couldn't be said at the front, where you've got electronically adjustable seats, and therefore allows you to adjust your riding height and indeed the position of your seat to your heart's content. Now, in terms of storage space, you've got these mesh compartments found behind the front of the doors, which is very much a norm in most vehicles, but it's nice to see that you've also got a space for 500 milliliter bottles in the rear doors, the same that you could be said about the front doors. Of course, space is a little bit more limited at the rear. As for the boot, you've got 357 litres, and with the seats popped down, that extends up to 1,417 litres, which is pretty good for a car of its class, because by comparison, the Nissan Leaf has 435 and 1,176 litres, whereas the Renault Zoe has 338 and 1,225 litres. So if you're carrying large goods, or indeed, let's say, a few mountain bikes, this vehicle will be much more better suited than its alternatives. And now we get on to driving, and first off, let's talk about cabin noise. Now, there's a little bit of tyre noise that creeps in, specifically when you're going at speed on the motorway. On the plus side, the rest of the cabin is well insulated, so therefore you don't hear too much noise creeping in from the A-pillars, and on top of that, it just leads to just a little bit more pleasant experience. Remember what I said about that external speaker? Well, it's a non-issue because you don't really hear it. As for the manoeuvrability and the driving comfort, now, as I mentioned before, the seats are a little bit stiff, and oddly, so is the suspension. So therefore, when you're going over potholes or road that's just a little less well suited, or indeed over speed bumps, you're going to feel it just a little bit more than you would be accustomed to versus a family-sized hatchback or a small-sized vehicle. In this domain, the Renault Zoe is far better suited and just makes for a lot more pleasurable drive within the city commute. So I just found it a little bit odd with the setup of the Ioniq Electric, whereby it does have a bit of a stiff suspension. But on the plus side, this means that you do have very little body roll, specifically when you're going at speed around country roads. Now, as for manoeuvrability, it's extremely easy because the steering wheel makes light work of either tight corners, or indeed if you want to be driving in around a city and weaving in and out of traffic. Here, the steering wheel will stiffen up if you go into sport mode. If you're in comfort or eco mode, it's a little bit harder, as you might expect given the name and what it's trying to achieve, so it shouldn't come as no surprise. Speaking of sport mode and in terms of its performance, here you've got 100 kilowatts of power at your disposal, and that's thanks to a single front mounted motor, so that dispatches around 135 horsepower for those people who want to kind of translate it to a ICE based engine. In this respect, the car is claimed to get from 0 to 60 in 9.9 seconds, but from my test using the V-Box Sport, I found it to achieve this time in 9.17 seconds, which is pretty good, although in comparison to some of its competitors will be a little bit more sluggish, and that's just namely due to the weight of the car and indeed the size of the car. Elsewhere, the car has a top speed of 103 miles an hour, which would be plentiful for a lot of individuals, but just worth bearing in mind if you're going to be on the Autobahn, for example, with this car. Now, this car does suffer from a slight problem, and that's only if you are a little bit harsh with the accelerator, whereby if you put your foot down to the metal, you'll get a lot of front wheel spin, and this becomes inherently apparent on country roads or roads that are a little bit icy or a bit wet. This is because the amount of power that's being delivered to the front wheels only, and here you've got 295 Newton meters of torque at your disposal at any given time, which is, well, one of the joys of driving an all-electric car. Speaking of which, driving an all-electric car, one of the most important factors is its all-electric range. Now, Hyundai claimed that its 38.3 kilowatt hour battery will give you around 193 miles, at least according to the WLTP standard. In my test, however, that figure is more like 140 to 150 miles. And as a result, in comparison to its competitors, namely the Nissan Leaf E Plus or the Renault Zoe, this is just not as comparable in comparison to those two cars, because they deliver around 180 to 210 miles, so therefore making for just a little bit less range anxiety. Not to say this gives you range anxiety, it's just that in comparison to cars of its similar price tag, those other cars will just do a lot better job. In order to recoup energy back into the battery pack, here's where I think Hyundai have really nailed it in comparison to their competitors. Unlike its rivals where you have to step inside the vehicle, set the regenerative braking level, this is not the case with the Ioniq Electric. You can set it through the infotainment display depending on your drive mode, and each time you step in, it will default to the comfort mode. So whatever regenerative braking level you have set for the comfort mode, it will basically remember that setting and essentially mean that you are driving with that regenerative braking level, whichever your preference is. Now, in my case, it is the harshest level, level 3, as that means I can do a bit more of a one pedal approach. Speaking of one pedal approach, it's not quite as harsh as, let's say, a BMW i3 or some other vehicles out there. In comparison, this is, well, let's say if I take my foot off the pedal over here, it can come to a stop, but it'll take a while, and as a result means that, well, you just need to apply some pressure on the brake in order to come to a complete standstill. Now, of course, you can plug in the vehicle, and this has got a CCS port found at the passenger side, giving you a 80% charge in under 60 minutes, or if you resort to its Type 2 port instead, which has a 7.2 kilowatt input, this will give you a 100% charge in just under 6 hours. Now, as for safety systems, you've got a whole host of them built in, from blind spot assist or cruise control, or indeed lane keep assist, although the latter mode does ping you from left and right a little bit on the motorway. There is also rear cross traffic alert, which gives you a little bit of an alert or a bit of a warning if you are reversing out of a space and you haven't noticed some cars or a pedestrian. And front cross traffic alert essentially alerts you when there's a car that's stopped in front of you and you might have not noticed and therefore, well, need to take action. Now, elsewhere you've got front and rear parking sensors and a rear view camera. Now, normally I wouldn't emphasize the use of a rear view camera, because normally you'd expect this to be included in a car that costs £30,000 or more. But the thing is, over here, the rear view window visibility is pretty low. So therefore, when you are reversing out of a space, it's actually, well, pretty much fundamental for you to use the rear view camera instead, because it gives you a little bit more visibility. That bar that goes across the rear boot means that it's a little bit hard to see your surroundings. And so, for example, we've got a motorbike over here. Had this been placed behind me, of course I'd see it, but if it's going from left to right, I might not have seen it when I am reversing out of a car space. And this all leads me on to my verdict. What do I make about the Hyundai Ioniq Electric, other than being a little bit of a mouthful to say? Well, quite frankly, I think Hyundai have done a decent job in terms of producing an all-electric saloon-sized based vehicle. However, unlike the Kona Electric, their all-electric SUV, which pretty much stands out in comparison to the rest of the vehicles that you can find out there on the market, the Ioniq Electric fails to stand out in that same way because of its competitors. The Nissan Leaf and Renault Zoe both offer either a more practical design or indeed one that will last a lot longer on a single all-electric charge. So that's just my opinion and thoughts about it. Do let me know in the comments below what you make of it. And if you've got any questions, of course, do ask me down below as well. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course, favourite and share, as it always helps the channel grow. All right, I've been Chris from TotallyEV. Take care and bye-bye.